They be on us every time we got any type of thing. All right, man. We're gonna try to finish this thing.
We ain't playing with the Most High word, that's why.
Yeah, that's
I ain't
right.
got time to be doing. No, we don't.
So we're just gonna keep going. Save now, I beseech you. Oh yeah, I beseech you. Send now prosperity. Send now prosperity. These people ain't crying out to the Most High to give them the wealth that they need or the finances. All right. Blessed be he that cometh in the name of Yahuwah. We have blessed you out of the house of Yahuwah. Elohim is Yahuwah, which have showed us light, and bind the sacrifice with cords, even unto the horns of the altar. You are my Elohim, and I will praise you. You are my Elohim, I will exalt you. Oh, give thanks unto Yahuwah, for he is good, for his mercy endures forever. So again, Psalms 113 through 118 is what they call the Hallel Psalms. And during the Feast of Tabernacles, they would just continually, every day, be reciting these psalms, right? So this lesson is titled The Spirit of the Inquisition for a reason. As I've been doing research and just looking at stuff, I'm like, man, the more things change, the more things stay the same. And so we got this video where this guy's going to let you know, because from the research that we've been doing, from the book Lost Tribes and Promised Lands, it talked about how, they started racism. The antithesis of racism was from the church, right, against new Christians, which were the Jews and Moors that had come from Africa. So, and then it makes a distinction between the Spanish Jewry and the Ashkenazi Jewry. And then it lets you know that, okay, so then they started calling us Moranos, right? Because we converted, or conversos. Moranos means swine. Conversos means we converted to Christianity, but then it was switched to Catholicism, because at its core, there is no difference between Christianity and Catholicism because of the Reformation, right? Because that was the reforming of the Roman Catholic Church, or of the Roman Empire, through religion, right? And in that, they started coming up with all these laws to where it was basically illegal to be a Yahudim or a Jew. They came up with purity of blood laws, right? You had to prove that you didn't have any, 1 ounce of Jewish or Yahudim blood in you. If you could not prove that, then they had legal right to discriminate against you, right? And this wasn't this racism had nothing to do with skin color. It wasn't a colorism thing like it is now. This had to do with literal bloodlines, right? This had to do with different races of people, because all black people are not the same quote unquote race. Right, that's a lie. That's why we have to get back to nationalities, because it deals with blood lines. So then, like I said, Moranos, Conversos, they come up with all these derogatory terms, and then there was certain colleges that said, okay, if you have any Spanish Yahudim blood in you, you couldn't go to that school. Racism in universities. Then they started saying, hey, if you got any Yahudim blood in you, you cannot live here in these communities. That's the definition of a sundown town. We went over that, right? So you start seeing patterns. I'm like, man, this is really starting to feel like the spirit of the Inquisition, because what has Trump done? What has this rise in Christian nationalism really done? They've attacked affirmative action, DEI, even though it wasn't mainly for black people, and affirmative action, we weren't the main benefactors of it either. But then critical race theory, so they're not going to teach slavery anymore. Trump brought his own Bible to be placed in schools. Black History Month is effectively gone at the federal level, and most of the states are probably going to follow suit. And then all of the slave exhibits, he made them destroy and get rid of all that stuff, effectively erasing a certain group of people's heritage and history. Right? Why? That's for a reason. This is literally following the pattern of the Spanish Inquisition. Because again, they wanted you to convert, but then you could not Like you couldn't perform certain jobs because you would be in too much proximity with quote unquote old Christians, which were old Christians. That definition goes back to old Catholics,
Yeah.
right? There is no difference between Christianity and Catholicism. Catholicism or Catholics are the head of the Christian denomination or religion, in case you don't know that. That's why they changed, because the Roman Catholic Church changed the Shabbat or the Saturday or the Sabbath day from Saturday, the seventh day of the week, to the first day of the week. And they brag about how that is their mark of power.
Yeah.
So, because you talked about that yesterday or the day before. So, fair use again, this is for educational and training purposes.
Hi, my name is Frank Schaefer, and may I tell you what Project 2025 really is? Now, I just had my 72nd birthday, but years ago when I was a young man, in my teens, in my 20s, as the nepotistic sidekick to my evangelist father, Francis Schaefer, I met all the people who, 50 years later, can be seen to have laid the foundation for Project 2025. For the takeover of the Republican Party, for the manipulation of Donald Trump should he be reelected, with a program that has its roots in the Roman Catholic Middle Ages. Let me explain my introduction.
Back to the Middle Ages from the Roman Catholic Church? That's a little strange. That sounds like the Inquisition to me. Why would this guy say something like that? I heard that, I was like, oh, no. Wait. What do you mean, fella? What are you talking about? Okay, we'll keep going.
To this project. Back in the day, my dad had a ministry in Switzerland called L'Abri Fellowship. And one of the people who would visit us on a quite regular basis, because he had a chalet on the other side of the mountain, was the founder of the National Review magazine, the ultra-conservative William F. Buckley. Now, Bill Buckley would come over and have tea with Dad, and as Dad's nepotistic sidekick, I would sit in on their conversations, throw in my 2 cents worth once in a while, and we were talking about the fact that Bill believed that somehow our country was taken over by a liberal elite and they needed to be pushed back in some way. He founded a magazine to do some of that pushing back. And Bill was an intellectual. He was a terrific interviewer. He had his program Firing Line, and he talked to all sorts of people. Unlike today's religious right that only talk to themselves, he would reach out and talk to people he even disagreed with. But when he would come talk to us, he and my dad saw eye to eye on issues like abortion, on the rising power of the feminist movement. They were both conservatives. They believed that this secular humanist direction of our culture was going to be bad for us. In the best of all worlds, Bill Buckley would have been living in a Roman Catholic dominated world where there was no contraceptives, there was no abortion, there was no sexual promiscuity, as he called it, which was sex before marriage, et cetera, et cetera. But he was an old-fashioned conservative, an educated man, would have despised, loathed, vomited at the sight of Donald Trump, had a keen nose for con artists, and would have had nothing to do with him. At about the same time, there was a breakaway bishop in the Roman Catholic Church who became famous, that some of you may have heard of and a lot of you have not heard of, by the name of Archbishop Lefebvre. Archbishop Lefebvre and my dad saw eye to eye, though Archbishop Lefebvre was a Roman Catholic and my father was a Reformed Calvinist Protestant, on the fact that we should not depart from what they called the Christian tradition. So, for instance, Lefebvre got in trouble with the Vatican because back in the 1960s and 70s, he railed against Vatican II, the conference that, quote unquote, modernized the Roman Catholic Church and put the Latin Mass into English. Boy, why is Frank Schaefer diving into the weeds like this? Because I'm giving you a little bit of a history lesson that unfortunately even our, quote, prestige press seems to be ignorant of. So when Dad and Lefebvre talked, they talked about the modernization of the Roman Catholic Church and how bad this was. And Dad and Lefebvre would draw comparisons with what happened to evangelical Protestants when liberal mainline denominations took over institutions like Princeton University and replaced the fundamentalists who had been in those schools people like Machen and other theologians who were thrown out in the 1920s and were replaced by liberal, mainline, mainstream evangelicals, and then liberal Protestants. Okay. Now, what does this have to do with anything? Well, fast forward to the 1970s when Dad and I were making an anti-abortion project with C. Everett Koop, who became Ronald Reagan Surgeon General, called Whatever Happened to the Human Race. And I had a meeting with Archbishop Fulton Sheen of New York, who at that time had a very popular television program. And I remember meeting with the bishop 3 times in his apartment on Park Avenue, by the way, a very nicely appointed apartment, as bishops tend to have. And he told me, you and your dad, Francis, are like the cavalry coming over the hill to rescue our movement. And by our movement, he meant conservative Roman Catholics standing up for what they regard as the ancient tradition. No abortion, no contraceptives, no sex before marriage, anti-gay, no homosexual marriage, no tolerance of any deviance from the Roman Catholic vision of a theocratic state, right back into the Middle Ages, pre-Reformation, pre-Enlightenment, pre-science, superstition all the way down. Now, Fulton Sheen introduced me to some people from an outfit called the Knights of Columbus, some of who were members of an organization called Opus Dei. Now, by the time you get to Opus Dei, you are talking about the deep-seated, fascistic, intolerant wing of the Roman Catholic Church. Stuff that sounds like it's out of a novel, but it's for real. What are their roots in modern Europe? Modern Europe. Francisco fascists in Spain. Francisco fascists, as opposed to, say, German fascists, that followed in the footsteps of the dictatorship of Spain and Portugal, pushing back against what they regarded as modernism. And this organization was founded, it's a shadowy, secret organization, to help push forward a fascistic, Roman Catholic centralized agenda that would both crush freedom and democracy and at the same time give a place of precedence to so-called religious liberty, but just for one religion, staunch Roman Catholic traditionalists, in the line of Archbishop Lefebvre, Bill Buckley, Fulton Sheen. And so Opus Dei became this organization in Europe and in the United States of people in high places, in government and other places, that genuinely, and I know this sounds weird, in an age of conspiracy theories where there are very few conspiracies for real, but this actually was a conspiracy to put people in high places and to influence the democratic process and, if possible, someday take it over in the name of the church. Exactly the same program that the inquisitors of the Spanish Inquisition that were torturing Protestants and Jews and others would have been familiar with back in the day. No stretch at all.
God is basically going down the same roads as the Inquisition? Am I tripping? Did y'all just hear that? Okay.
Now, back in the 1970s and 80s, there were a couple influential people like Richard John Newhouse, who started First Things magazine. He was a Lutheran pastor who converted to the Roman Catholic Church. Fast forward, much as J.D. Vance has converted. And why Richard converted, and I knew him pretty well. In fact, when he started First Things, he asked me to write a couple of articles for them, which I did, and I brought him some other authors. For instance, I brought him a lot of people who published with Regnery Gateway, which was the hard right fundamentalist version of Catholicism in those days, the kind of thing that produced eventually Amy Coney Barrett, who grew up reading books published by Regnery Gateway, etc. And I remember that his program was to also, quote, bring the church back. So they had two enemies. The modern Vatican, as they saw it, they wanted the Mass in Latin. They wanted everything kept the same. No women in the priesthood, not even girls serving at the altar, nothing. The priest facing the altar, not the people. All of those traditions reestablished, but they also had a right-wing project to not only save America from democracy, I just said that, save America from democracy and replace it with theocracy and what they regarded as the law of God. But their program went a step further, and that was that they should undermine and overthrow the government as it existed. And why did all these threads come together? Because my dad wrote a book called A Christian Manifesto that sold 1 million copies. And the mainstream press paid no attention to it because back pre-Trump, they could care less about all those people in the middle, the unwashed mob who believed in literal Jesus and all this stuff, paid no attention. But it sowed the seeds of a movement which eventually became the Heritage Foundation and the Federalist Society that came out of what Lefebvre was doing, Bill Buckley, Fulton Sheen, Newhouse, me, my dad, and others. Fast forward to the present, Project 2025. You thought I'd never get to that. Where does Project 2025 come from? It comes from this background. Who do the leaders of Project 2025 work with, and what association do they belong to? Opus Dei. What is the mission of Opus Dei today? The same thing it was in Francisco Fascist Spain in the 1930s and 40s. What is their vision for America? Well, it was laid out in a book called Unhumans, in which liberals and evangelicals who don't toe the line on the hard right, say evangelicals who don't vote for Trump, and everyone except conservative Roman Catholics and evangelicals tuned in to having heroes like Lefebvre, if they've read enough, or Fulton Sheen, or Newhouse, and for more modern versions of these people, Opus Dei, who have put in place people like Amy Coney Barrett, who basically, her kind were groomed for 50 years by the Federalist Society, people I knew back in the 70s and 80s who started these organizations, Heritage Foundation. But they'd kind of given up on changing our culture. They'd given up on their program. They expected Hillary Clinton to be elected. They saw that we had a first Black president that went against everything they believed in. They were despairing. And then comes Trump. Now, a lot of the people in Opus Dei, and back in the day, people like Richard John Newhouse were educated people, people who loathed low-life con artists like Trump, self-evident liars, self-serving, money-grubbing people selling rotten steaks at overinflated prices, stupid television shows, real estate con games, tax cheating, tax evasion, not paying their workers, one bullshit artist thing after another, multiple marriages, affairs, flying around on Jeffrey Epstein's plane, accused of rape of a 13-year-old girl, brags about grabbing women by, I'm sorry, I'm going to say what he said, the pussy, and getting away with it. They would have had nothing to do with him. And eventually, when he was running for office, a lot of these same types of people, although my old friend Bill Buckley was dead by that time, as was Richard John Newhouse, would have vomited at the prospect of the MAGA movement following this cult leader and con artist. And they would have put it down to bad education and stupidity. They would have been much harsher in their words about Trump than Hillary Clinton ever was. Fast forward to the present when he's running again for president against Kamala Harris. Now, all of a sudden, the Opus Dei people running the Federalist and Heritage Foundations jump into line saying, look, he is such a dumbass, getting $350,000 for promoting a Bible, selling sneakers, portraits of him as a superhero. He's an idiot. They know that. They say that in private. All these people would go, if you ask them what they thought about Donald Trump. But he can be manipulated because the very fact he has no program except his own self-gratification and con artist, petty criminality, the fact that he can be completely manipulated as he was by Ralph Reed in his first presidency when Ralph said to him, look, if I'll give you a list from the Federalist Society, if you make them judges, I'll bring you evangelical votes from the pro-life movement, even though you're not a pro-lifer, even though you probably are the father of many children who were aborted by your mistresses and porn stars and the rest. We'll pretend that didn't happen. We'll say God has a prophecy about you and we'll make you president. But now in the second term, Trump has a much higher stakes bid. He's trying to stay out of prison. He's trying to stay a step ahead of the law. And the Supreme Court he put in place, the majority, which has people like Amy Coney Barrett and other Opus Dei types on it, has given him a rubber stamp free pass saying anything you do as an official action, you can get away with, something that no other president has ever had. Richard Nixon would still be president today. I know he's dead, but he still would be if that had been in place during that time. By the way, President Ford was a friend of my family. My mother and dad always used to stay in his White House. My mom would go swimming in Betty Ford's pool. Mike Ford, their son, lived in my house for a year. Gail Ford, Mike's wife, babysit my daughter, Jessica. We were part of the mix back in the 70s and 80s. We knew all these people well. I have a folder this thick of handwritten notes from various Republican presidents to me and my dad, thanking us for working on their behalf. Blah, 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 blah. But I know what the fuck I'm talking about. So listen to me. The Opus Dei connection with Project 2025 means this. Should Trump become president again and be kept out of jail by conservative, right-wing, 1930s style fascist Roman Catholics, because that's what this is, he will reciprocate by undermining the entire federal bureaucracy and replacing it with people who agree with the kind of people who run Opus Dei. They will no longer be federal employees in any sense. They will be on a witch hunt for everyone who disagrees with them. Think about it. Social Security, Medicare, all these things would run by fascist right wings, people who could have literally been working for Francisco in Spain in the fascist government there, but they'll be here. Gay rights, finished. Gay rights, finished. Gay rights, finished. Want to hang a trans or gay person off a bridge? You might well get a pardon from the kind of people they will put in the judiciary. You think I'm kidding? Check out the history of Spain under Franco.
Over a year ago, before Trump got elected. And again, he kept tying everything back to Roman Catholic, Spain, medieval time frames. Because actually the stuff that we're going over, so I'm like, that's really strange. Really strange.
Hi, my name is...
So as we keep going, what is propaganda, or what's the definition of propaganda?
I can't really put it in words.
Saying something is, but it really isn't.
Look, right, like half truths.
Hyping up
Half
something to
truth.
get a reaction or something like that.
Right. So I went, of course, I looked online for the definition of propaganda. It's dissemination of information, facts, arguments, rumors, half-truths, or lies to influence public opinion. It is often conveyed through mass media. Propaganda is more or less the systematic effort to manipulate other people's beliefs, attitudes, or actions by means of symbols, words, gestures, banners, monuments, music, clothing, insignia, hairstyles, designs, or coins, and foods or postage stamps, and so forth. Deliberateness and a relatively heavy emphasis on manipulation distinguish propaganda and casual conversation or the free and easy exchange of ideas, right? So propaganda is really just influencing people falsely, to put it like simple, right? But it's all about manipulation.
Like this is a democratic shutdown.
Right, like it's a democratic shutdown, propaganda. But that's actually not the earliest definition of it. And they've used this method for a long time, right? This is an ancient method that they use, but it actually goes back to the church. So the first definition of a congregation of the Roman Curia having jurisdiction over missionary territories and related institutions. So even the word propaganda goes back to the Christian church. Paganism.
If you break down the word, like in English, college English, we had to learn how to break down the words and
Break it down.
Pro and then pagan, duh. So each of those means something, and that's how they got that. So
You're right, pro-pagan. Okay, I see that, yeah.
yeah.
So just like the other one said, it said the spreading of ideas, information, or rumor for the purpose of helping or injuring an institution, a cause, or a person. Ideas, facts, or allegations spread deliberately to further one's cause or to damage an opposing cause. Also, a public action having such an effect. So they've always used propaganda against us and against other people, right? So just to further prove that this goes back to the church, when you go back to etymology.com, it says propaganda, the origin. It's a committee of cardinals in charge of foreign missions of the Catholic Church. So behind all this stuff has always been the Roman Catholic Church. and their propaganda. And we're going over this because we're going to see what they started to do to our people back in the times of the Spanish Inquisition, right? Propaganda. This lesson is called The Spirit of the Inquisition. And Jerome, if you don't mind, will you read this slide? No, I'll read this one. You can read the next one. It says, the clamor for la pieza de sangre, purity of blood, came largely from the rising classes in society, and was concentrated mainly in that most democratic of medieval institutions, the church. But there has survived into our own time a piece of evidently vividly suggesting that something like a courtly version of the emergent anti-Jewish racism also was making an appearance in the middle of the 15th century. This is a short satirical work written anonymously in about 1450. Something of a Swiftian modest proposal. The work purports to be a letter written by King Juan II to an old Christian nobleman, granting him the privileges of a Marrano. So an old Christian would be called a Catholic, right? And a Marrano was a Jew that converted to Christianity. So I'll just read this one and then you'll start on the next one. It says, the bearer is given royal license to be like a Marrano, or a converted Jew, and is empowered to use the subtleties, arts, dealings, and deceptions which the said Marranos, without fear of Yah or shame before their fellow men, use. Right? This is one of their old tactics. Go ahead, Jerome.
Profit by this includes giving wicked counsel in ruling circles, changing high interest rates on loans, and even entertaining the priesthood, mainly for the purpose. It would seem to listen to the confusion of old Christians and getting to know their secret sins. So
they're saying that we would listen to them in confessional and get all, their dirty little secrets, right? This is propaganda. So this piece came out, and then this is what created the image of the Jew at that point in time, right? Because there was already a rising civil unrest because of the purity of blood laws and all this other type of stuff. So now they're trying to make it to where everybody hates the Jews, right? Okay, keep going.
Although religious beliefs is allowed, you may not go.
You may go
deceitfully into churches and other sacred places without any devotion, carrying your account book instead of prayer book, or pastille psaltery, and pretending to recite the penitential psalms as so many of the said race of Marranos are in the habit of doing.
So they're saying that everything that we were doing was wicked. Again, they're trying to create this image of us. I'm going to read this one, and then you'll read the next one. So it says, the bearer may also go about presenting views contrary to those of the church, saying, for example, that there is no other world but the one which we are born in and die. That's what you call Sadduceeism. Because in the New Testament, you see the scribes, the Pharisees, and the Sadducees. The Sadducees did not believe in anything after death, pretty much, right? You're born here and you die. That's it. As the said Marranos maintain and affirm contrary to truth. Meanwhile, he may, as the Marranos do, maintain his household in accordance with the Torah, observes Saturday as a day of rest while working on Sundays and church holidays, drink the wine of the Baraka, learn Hebrew science in the synagogue, and have a Jewish burial. So again, they were saying that everything that we were doing was just wicked and contrary to the church to make us public enemy number one, right? Well, I can read this one. That's fine. It says, one can easily read through enough of the social reality underlying this vehemently spiteful portrait, right? But then there comes a sudden departure into pure myth, an ominous fabrication that at once harks back to medieval superstition about murderous Jewish doctors and echoes forward to Nazi cant about, I don't even want to say that, Rassenschad. Our satirical letter gives, so then it starts talking about this crazy stuff. License to you and your descendants to become apothecaries, physicians, and surgeons, and under the pretext of curing and seeking to restore the body of any old Christian from illness to health or old Catholic, to endeavor to kill and disgrace him as the said race of Marranos do. So they're saying that we become these doctors, whatever, to kill them, right? As much as out of enmity and hatred as in order to marry the wives of the old Christians. So they're saying we were doing that so we can take their wives. Okay. So again, they created this propaganda which created that civil unrest. So now, why did they have the Spanish Inquisition, right? Why did it happen? So then it says, they kill, swallowing up their goods and property, and polluting and staining the pure blood. Polluting and staining the pure blood. What more vivid example could there be of a spiritual and social revilement turning into a biological one? So again, they made us public enemy number one through propaganda, through the Roman Catholic Christian Church. At its beginning point, the notion is a metaphor, an image of a blot on the escutcheon, but at the deepest and most terrified levels of the consciousness, metaphor swiftly translates into reality, as reality does into metaphor. One wonders to what extent that image of poison that Jewish doctors had used or that had been infiltrated into Christian Wales had been a vision of blood all along. So they wanted to kill us. The emerging pattern of anti-converso racism in the 15th century was completed by the establishment of the Spanish Inquisition in 1478. So all this stuff starts coming out, all this propaganda. Then they create the Spanish Inquisition for a specific group of people that came from Africa centuries earlier, right? By this time, the Papal Inquisition of the Middle Ages had lost considerable energy it had in, right? So again, even with the images that they're painting, no wonder like everyone started hating us. Like, wait, man, their doctors are killing us. They're poisoning our wells. They're doing all, they want to take our wives and our women. They control the flow of news. They control everything. Like, so in fact, they never been strong on the Iberian soil. But when the Inquisition was revived by the kingdoms of Aragon and Castile, united through the marriage of their respective sovereigns, Ferdinand and Isabella in 1469, it was to take on not only new relentlessness, but also a new character of national exclusiveness, For though papal sanction was obtained for it, the Spanish Inquisition, unlike the older one, was placed directly under the authority of the sovereigns and not of the papacy. This was not the only way in which it became quite Spanish, however. For whereas the medieval Inquisition had been aimed at heresy in general, the Spanish one came into being primarily to ferret out what was called the Judaizing heresy, the kind of dual doctrinal existence that Pedro de la Caballeria had lived, to be flaunted no more. According to tradition, the decision to establish the Inquisition in Spain had come out of an incident involving Marranos in Seville that, almost there, okay, so Seville was an old hotbed of our people. We had a whole bunch of people that was in Seville, wealthy people, right? Old hotbed of Jewish activity and a violent reaction against it, where the pogroms are acts of violence that happen against the Jews. Right? Where the pogroms of 1391 had first broken out. You remember that riot in 1391 from a couple of days ago. A Spanish nobleman, pursuing an intrigue with a Jewish woman, had entered her home uninvited on an evening near Easter time and come upon a Passover seder, among whose celebrants were some of the city's most prominent new Christians. Word of this reached Friar Alonso de Hojeda, prior of a chapter of the Dominican order in Seville, who was already a prominent enemy of both Judaizers and Jews, even though he was a converso also. Hojeda brought the story to Queen Isabella, so he was an informant, whose court was then temporarily residing in nearby Cordova, and appealed for action. The matter was a sensitive one because a number of high positions in the courts of both the king and the queen were held by New Christians and by Jews. This did not necessarily mean a court that was exclusively riddled with heresy. The queen's zealously Catholic confessor, so again, Christian Catholic, same thing, Fray Thomas de Torquemada, was also probably of new Christian descent. So again, he was pretty much snitching on his own people. And he was a strong influence at court, but the time had come for a point to be proven. The newly united and militant Spain was on the brink of a new surge of Reconquista. That's what Trump and them are doing. This is the new Reconquista that would wipe out the last traces of Moorish political society on the peninsula. And the presence of a pervasive heresy was no more tolerable than that of the Kingdom of Granada. The Inquisition was established on November the 1st, 1478, and the dreadful tribunal celebrated its first auto de fe on February the 6th, 1481. What is auto de fe? Y'all know?
This is the first time I heard of it.
Auto de fe. So, Jerome, if you don't mind, will you read this slide?
An auto de fe from Portuguese in Spain for act of faith
So it means act of faith.
was a public ritual of the Spanish Inquisition where sentences were announced and carried out for those condemned for heresy. These events were used for public display of the authority of the Inquisition. It involved a punishment ranging from
Penance.
flogging, and exile to imprisonment, and in the most serious cases, execution by burning at the stake.
So they would burn some of these people at the stake? I thought you burned witches at the stake.
Wow.
Right, so this is auto de fe, right? So it says, the term translates to act of faith and was a public ceremony that served to reinforce the authority of the Inquisition by publicly condemning individuals and carrying out their sentences, right? Now, these acts of faith, it says auto de fe took place in Spain and its colonies between the 15th and 19th century. So that's the 14th and 1800s, right? As part of the Inquisition's efforts to enforce religious orthodoxy. So again, our ancestors were burned at the stake. So it says, when a sermon was preached by Hojita, and 6 men and women were burned publicly at the stake. A few years later, the Inquisition issued the following specifications concerning the Judaizing heresy to all associates, neighbors, and servants of new Christians. Now, we're not going to get into that today. We got another video to watch because like auto de fe, they would be burning people at the stake, right? So for one, fair use is for educational and training purposes. You remember shortly after Charlie Kirk was assassinated, there was a hanging at a university, right? A black university. And they said that it was suicide. Okay.
You didn't have to tell black people that Delta State University student Trey Reed didn't hang himself. And now a second autopsy proves it.
Everybody on this campus is labeling this as a lynching, which it most clearly definitely is, but they're still investigating. But as always, the police are saying, oh, we don't suspect foul play. We don't suspect that anything happened.
One of our key initiatives now is our autopsy initiative. That came out a little over 18 months ago that got launched. And that gives free secondary autopsies to any families of loved ones who have been killed in a police-related death.
2 autopsies, 2 different versions of events. One showed no foul play. The other states that 21-year-old black student Trey Reed had marks on his body, seemingly proving he was lynched. After Colin Kaepernick offered to help Trey's family get justice, the second autopsy was done, and the results are chilling. And what's equally disturbing is that no one is talking about this. Mainstream media quickly buried this story under other headlines, and now some officials are denying that the second autopsy showed signs of struggle. So who's telling the truth here? Why did police initially tell Trey's family that they found him in his dorm room, only to later admit he was found hanging from a tree in the middle of Delta State University campus? And why is there no footage of Trey on the day he was found when the entire campus is covered by security cameras? These are just some of the unanswered questions we need to talk about before they delete this case from public memory.
Oftentimes, the sheriff is the coroner, or the pathologist who is doing the autopsy. They have a relationship with the police department. So there's a lot of bias in the autopsies.
There's a big update on the Trey Reed case in Mississippi, and honestly, it's worse than anyone thought. Colin Kaepernick stepped in and paid for an independent autopsy, and what it found is horrifying. According to sources online, Trey Reed, a 21-year-old black student at Delta State University, didn't just die on campus. It turns out he was allegedly beaten before being hung from that tree. There are reports claiming that the second autopsy found blunt force trauma all over his body, meaning someone physically attacked him first. And according to some social media users who've been in contact with Trey's family, Trey's own mother suspects there's a cover-up going on.
Trey Reed's second autopsy came back and they ass in trouble. Delta State University is in trouble. I told y'all that they were gonna lie. I told y'all they were trying to cover that shit. Blunt force trauma to the back of the head. Hear me out. Blunt force trauma to the back of the head. And I told y'all, people from Mississippi don't unalive themselves by hanging themselves. What really pissed me off that it was black men in my inbox telling me that, oh, you act like black men don't hang themselves. They don't. They don't. Where you from? Another thing, for the people that telling me to shut up and stop posting the family, me and Trey Reed mama already talked. We talked like 2 weeks ago. She had already hit me up and was thanking me. I'm not even gonna show y'all the message, but I am gonna say this. She said that she's not scared. She's not running. They doing everything in this world to break that woman. At least y'all can do is support her.
Now, the official story is that Trey took his own life, but Trey's loved ones are not buying it, and they're demanding a full, detailed investigation. And let's be real, if this had been anyone else, the mainstream media would already be all over it. But because he's a young black man in Mississippi, they're trying to bury the story and calling people conspiracy theorists for questioning the official narrative. But if you followed this case from the start, you know it's not just one part that's suspicious. There are so many red flags that simply don't line up with what the police are saying. So here's what the authorities originally told everyone. On September 15th, Trey Reed was found hanging from a tree on campus, and right away, they ruled out foul play, quickly performed an autopsy, and said Trey took his own life.
Autopsy shows there was no foul play in the death of the young black man found dead at the Delta State University in Mississippi. 21-year-old Trey Reed was found hanging from a tree on campus Monday morning. The Cleveland Police Department says the Mississippi State Medical Examiner determined Reed's cause of death as a suicide.
But anyone paying attention knows how suspicious that is. First off, Trey's family wasn't even told the truth at first. They were told that Trey's body was found inside his dorm. It was only after the news channels picked up the story that the family learned the horrifying reality, that Trey was actually hanging from a tree in the center of campus. The family's lawyer told Mississippi Free Press that on the morning of Trey's death, police arrived at Trey's family's home and told the family Trey was found dead in his dorm room. But then the family found out through media, not the school, that Trey's body was actually found hanging from a tree right in the middle of campus. And here's the thing, the family's lawyer is calling out the school for not releasing any security footage because this is a college campus with cameras everywhere. And from the moment Trey left his dorm or stepped onto campus, there should be a ton of footage. So why would the police tell the family Trey was found in his room? That doesn't seem like just a mistake. That's a huge inconsistency, and it makes you wonder what else they're hiding. And then there's the coroner's report. Initially, they said Trey had no broken bones, no marks, nothing that would suggest he'd been attacked. Those first autopsy results were released less than 48 hours after Trey's body was found. And according to the Cleveland Police Department, the local coroner's office found that the cause of death was hanging and the manner of death was self-inflicted. But insiders and people close to Trey were saying he had marks on his body that are not consistent with just hanging. And now, with the independent autopsy allegedly showing blunt force trauma, it seems that something was seriously off with the way this case was wrapped up so quickly without a more detailed investigation. Trey's family has now brought in civil rights attorney Ben Crump, and he's not playing around. He's calling for a full independent investigation and wants all the surveillance footage from the campus cameras. Crump posted a statement on his official website saying, Trey's family deserves answers they can trust. We cannot accept rushed conclusions when the stakes are this high. By demanding the family be allowed to view any video and commissioning an independent autopsy, we are taking every step to uncover the truth about what happened to Trey. Every student deserves to feel safe where they live and learn. That is why it is so important to get to the bottom of this tragedy.
During the Spanish Inquisition, the auto de fe, they were burned at the stake, and this ain't got nothing to do with being burned at the stake. But again, this happened literally shortly after Charlie Kirk was assassinated. And I don't know if y'all saw a bunch of those videos with the the extreme right, far right, how they was talking crazy about riding against us, even though we had nothing to do with it. You can kind of
didn't have to
understand
tell
where I'm coming from, especially once you watch this video. Because remember, the most extreme case of auto da fe was being burned at the stake. Fair use is for educational and training purposes. Shout out to We Woke Now.
The man's body was actually on fire when it was found last night in this spot where officials say they only later realized it was a man's body that was on fire and dangling from a rope on the underside of this 610 freeway.
And now we want to warn you, this next story, hard to hear. A man's body found hanging underneath the East Loop. It happened late last night. Our Ugochi Iloka joining us near the scene along Kirkpatrick Boulevard. And Ugochi, details from the story even more grim.
Sadly, that's correct. We're told that the man's body was actually on fire when it was found last night in this spot where officials say they only later realized it was a man's body that was on fire and dangling from a rope on the underside of this 610 freeway. This is video of officers just after 10 p.m. last night looking around after HFD responded to a fire here near the 5000 block of Kirkpatrick and 610. It was Union Pacific employees who first found the scene and called Houston firefighters, first reporting that this was a brush fire. However, that was not the case. Officials say when firefighters put out the flames, they discovered it was a man's body partially set ablaze and hanging from a rope. HPD says those firefighters got the fire out, but the man did not survive. The lieutenant investigating the tragedy says a homeless encampment is here too, but they aren't sure where the man was initially set on fire. She tells us she doesn't think his death was a suicide.
If he's not just hanging, it's like there's also the fire, so then it's like, well, what actually killed him? We don't know that. I mean, of course, that'll be something that, detectives and after the autopsy report comes out.
And the lieutenant you just heard from there says, unfortunately, there were no witnesses around when they first responded to the scene. If you know anything about this investigation or have information, you're asked to please call Houston Police or Crime Stoppers. Reporting in Northeast Houston, Ugochi Iloka, KHOU 11 News.
White man, fight back! 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 White man, fight back!
For 33 hours, I was praying that if this had to happen here, that it wouldn't be one of us, that somebody drove from another state, somebody came from another country. Sadly, that prayer was not answered the way I had hoped for.
White man, fight back! 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 White man, fight back!
Officials have released the identity of a student who was found on a campus hanging from a tree this morning. Campus officials and police made the announcement just a couple of hours ago in a news conference. 16 WAPT's Ross Adams live in the studio this afternoon. He's been following the story at Delta State all day. Ross, what are investigators saying?
Well, Troy, we are just hours into the investigation of this disturbing discovery on the Cleveland campus. Now, here is what we know right now. According to the Delta State Police Chief, they got a call around 7 o'clock Monday morning. First officers on the scene found the body of 21-year-old DeMartravion Trey Reed. He was hanging from a tree near the pickleball court that's in the central part of the campus. Reed is a Delta State student from Grenada. Now, there is already rampant social media speculation about what happened to Reed. At this point, investigators say there is no evidence of foul play.
But we, of course, again, with our partners, we've investigated every avenue, and again, we continue to investigate.
The university has contacted the Mississippi Bureau of Investigation, Cleveland Police Department, and the Bolivar County Sheriff's Office to assist them in the investigation. Today was supposed to be a happy day on the Delta State campus, celebrating its 100th anniversary. Instead, they are mourning the loss of this student. Classes were canceled Monday, and it's unclear if they will resume on Tuesday. Back to you, Troy.
Billions of dollars to mental health and the homeless population. A lot of them don't want to take the programs. A lot of them don't want to get the help that is necessary. You can't give them a choice. Either you take the resources that we're going to give you, or you decide that you're going to be locked up in jail. That's the way it has to be now.
Or involuntary lethal injection or something. Just kill them.
Yeah, Brian, why did it have to get to this point?
Right. I would say this: we're not voting for the right people. In North Carolina, wake up.
White man, fight back! 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 White man, fight back!
Check your top stories this morning. Now to new developments in a situation we brought you as breaking news last night at 10.
More than 20 police units were on the scene. This is the shooting at a homeless encampment that's been at the center of controversy for months now. It's over on East Lake Street.
So the encampment is on East Lake Street and 28th Avenue South. Our Barrett Leone joins us live in Minneapolis as we get new details into exactly what happened. And also, Barrett, of course, we know safety is at the top of mind here too.
Yeah, exactly. AJ, Heather, Minneapolis police are telling us this was a mass shooting that happened there last night. 8 people were shot, 4 are in critical condition. Authorities say right now they have not arrested anyone and don't have any suspects at this time. But really, there was a massive scene there last night, and we do have some video to show you. Now, according to law enforcement, gunfire broke out around 10 o'clock last night. Officers found victims both inside the encampment and on nearby sidewalks. Investigators say they're working to figure out what led up to the shooting and believe more than one shooter could be involved.
What's your thoughts? Please be respectful with your comments.
And I started seeing, especially when I saw that guy burning and hung, I'm like, that feels like a little bit like the Spanish Inquisition a little bit to me. Because again, it was shortly after Charlie Kirk died, the first quote-unquote black kid got hung. 5 days afterward? And it was a suicide. After you saw, I mean, there were so many, I'm telling you, if you watch the videos or read the comments, they talk crazy. White man fight back. White man killed him. Like, we ain't got nothing to do with none of that.
And autopsies aren't done that fast.
No, never. They're never done that fast. That's how you know it's a government cover-up. Because remember, all this goes back to the Heritage Foundation, which goes all the way back to the Roman Catholic Church from the Spanish Inquisition and Middle Ages.
Our investigation. When does the investigation get done that fast?
I've never heard it. Only when it's a cover-up.
When it's a cover-up, right?
And these things are signs or symbols to them to let them know that they're starting this next phase. So be careful. Don't be going extravagant places by yourself, even in the States. Make sure people know where you're going. Have somebody with you. I'm just saying be careful. Use wisdom. I'm trying to tell y'all, a lot of these people, they don't have no sense, no honor, and they don't care about human life. So that's all I got for today. Jerome, will you pray us out?
Dear Heavenly Father, you again another day. You bless us to see, dear Father. Thank you for this day. Thank you for what we've heard and eyes have seen, dear Father. Dear Father, help us be vigilant, dear Father, and mindful of our surroundings. Give us discernment, dear Father. Dear Father, help us to understand that everybody is not our friends, and people are willing to do whatever it takes, dear Father. Satan's on the rampage. I just ask you to put your hedge of protection around your people, dear Father. Keep us from all hurt, harm, and danger. And as we leave this assembly, dear Father, and we travel to our different destinations, let us find our homes better than we left them. These are blessings. In your Son's name I pray. Amen.
And then just one last thing. So they said either you're gonna take what they give you, or you're gonna be in jail, or you're gonna get forced involuntary injections.
Right.
This is America. We are Yehuda. This is YAH'S Assembly. So please subscribe, hit that notification bell, like and share our content. And as always, until next time, Shalom, tribe.
Whoa.